I want to watch this.
This is not an anti-meat video. We've all heard the arguments against meat, and yet in the EU and US, only between 1 and 6% of people don't eat it. Meat is just too tasty, convenient and ingrained in our culture for most of us to consider giving it up. Also, food is personal and nobody likes to be morally lectured. At the same time, we love animals. Most of us have pets and believe in animal rights. Few things make the internet as angry as animal cruelty. Both are true. We love meat and we love animals. Unfortunately, most animals we eat live in truly horrible conditions. We don't torture them for fun, but because it makes meat just a little bit more incredibly cheap. If we all paid just a tad more, we could avoid most.
Isn't that insane, chat? That the fucking full chicken is like $5 at Costco. The full cooked chicken, packaged chicken.
Animal suffering,
fucking insane.
Often just for a few pennies per meal. Disclaimer: farming is complicated. Many farmers are genuinely trying to give their animals the best life possible, but they're trapped in a complex system with extreme market pressure to keep.
Just the thought of it. Animal spawns in, grows, is fed constantly, quite constantly fed, grows up, and then it is processed, killed, properly, whatever, seasoned, cooked, sent, packaged, heated, sold, $5. That's insane.
Keep prices low. No two countries have the same standards, no two farms are equal, and solid data is often scarce. We've done our best to combine data from different regions and the prices you pay in the end. To keep things simple, we're going to classify farming practices into 3 broad groups: decent, prisons, and torture camps. This is a bit sketchy, and you've probably seen many more categories in the supermarket, like organic or grass-fed. We'll come to that later. So, fellow omnivores, what would it cost us to avoid animal torture and still have our fried chicken? Chickens. At any given time, there are about 26 billion chickens alive on Earth, as many as all other birds combined. Chickens seem dumb, but they're social.
Guys, tell me send me a DM on Discord.
Can communicate, solve problems, and feel empathy. And yet, we keep the vast majority in insane torture. Let's start with eggs. Worldwide, about 90% of laying hens live in torture camps, crammed in extremely tight cages where they can barely move.
Hold on.
They're unable to show any natural chicken behavior like nesting, roosting, foraging, or pecking at the ground, so they become extremely frustrated and end up hurting each other badly. To stop this, many farms clip their beaks. In the US and Europe, legal bans and consumer initiatives have improved the situation a lot in the last few years. But still, more than 50% of hens remain in cages. The insane thing is that this doesn't even save a lot of money. Let's say a dozen eggs costs you around €360 or dollars, 30 cents per.
My mom always only bought grain chicken. What the fuck? Like free grain, like free range grain chicken.
Egg. How much does it cost to free the hens? The main alternative to cages are barn systems. Hens are still kept indoors, but have twice as much space and roam freely. Barns are prisons. Still not amazing, but so much better. In the EU, barns increase the consumer price by about 2 cents per egg. The somewhat decent alternative is free range, where hens are allowed outdoors, often with proper access to vegetation. In the EU, this increases the price by about 7 cents per egg. Housing aside, one of the cruelest practices is chick culling. Male chicks don't lay eggs, so they're killed right after birth.
People say there's no difference, guys. My mom cooked the free-range chicken, and it was always bussin', the most bussin' chicken you've seen.
Usually by gassing or grinding. This is a really widespread practice used for caged, barn, and even organic eggs. 7 billion baby chickens are killed this way each year. France and Germany have banned this, so many breeding eggs here are scanned early and only female birds hatch, which may have increased costs by only 2 to 5 cents per egg. So if you pay 85 cents more for a dozen eggs, you can make a difference between serious chicken torture and pretty decent chicken lives. And for another 60 cents, you can help end chick culling too. Chicken meat is a different story. Most meat chickens today are genetic freaks, bred to reach amazing weights incredibly fast. Their internal organs are under a huge amount of stress and they can't even walk properly because of their weight, which causes them a lot of pain for much of their lives. It's hard to give exact numbers here, but if farmers were to switch to breeds that grow slower and suffer far less, a serving of chicken breast that you buy at $1.50 would become 9 cents more expensive in the US. 90% of meat chickens in the EU live in prisons or torture camps. They're kept indoors in extremely crowded conditions with sometimes dozens of birds per square meter, often in the dark and with poor ventilation. So what if we moved them all to prisons? One EU study found that giving them 30% more space, perches, fresh air and daylight would increase the price by another 13 cents per serving. Probably less than 5% of meat chickens live free range in relatively decent conditions. This meat is actually noticeably more expensive, double the price of regular chicken.
Double!
But chicken is the cheapest meat, so depending on the cut, you'd pay 35 cents to €1 or $1 more for a serving of chicken that had a decent life. Pigs. Pigs are basically dogs. They're as intelligent, social and playful as our wolf buddies and make lovable pets. So pigs really feel how they live and arguably have it the worst of all animals we eat. Probably more than 90% of all pigs live in torture camps. They spend their entire lives indoors in extremely crowded spaces on concrete floors without straw or bedding. Since this is far from what they need, they get frustrated and often fight. Piglets have their tails docked to stop tail biting. Most males are castrated after birth so that their meat will taste better, often without pain relief to save time. Mothers are kept in crates, extremely tight metal straitjackets where they can't move at all. This leads to extreme suffering for the mother and for the piglets, which are held in a barren area separated by metal bars and taken away at just 3 weeks old. Imagine treating dogs like that. First, let's get to the prison level.
Right.
Getting rid of crates would raise the cost of a €2 serving of pork by about 20 cents. Anesthesia for castration costs almost nothing, around 1 cent per kilogram of meat. And a study in Denmark found that giving pigs more straw and bedding material and 30% more space and other things that are more animal-friendly would increase the price per serving by another 20 cents.
20!
This is still an awful life for an animal this intelligent, but obviously much better. For 40 cents more per serving. Going one level further and giving pigs outdoor access for at least 40% of their lives and 300 to 400% more space indoors would increase the price per serving by another 80 cents. Just over 1% of pigs in the EU live in...
Yeah, but chat, isn't there like massive land in the US or whatever? They have so much land. There's not a way to just fucking have like 1 bazillion pig in some
we can't
ultra
know if
land
this is really
spot.
okay for such a smart and social animal, but it starts resembling something decent. And all for about $1.2 or euros more per serving of pig. Cows. Cows
not
raised
efficient.
for meat have it the best because they usually spend about 2/3 of their lives outdoors, making their lives pretty good. If they were in the wild, it'd be basically the same thing but less safe. Their lives are far from
Wait, that's more than humans. Wait, that's way more than humans. Hold on a minute.
perfect though, especially the end. The vast majority of cows spend the last months of their short lives in finishing feedlots, either prisons or torture camps, where they're fattened to reach their slaughter weight as fast as possible. Probably less than 5% of beef cattle in the US have lifelong access to outdoor pasture. And yet, a recent German study found that it only increases the price of beef by around 15%.
Oh, diseases.
The life quality of cows varies widely even within countries and regions, depending on the available land, climate and farming traditions. So it's really impossible to make more easy and cheap suggestions to make their lives better. Dairy cows do have it much worse. They're often kept indoors for most of the year and suffer pain, sole ulcers and lesions from standing on concrete. But once again, none of these things seem to be needed to have affordable milk.
Lab-grown
In
meat can
Germany,
suck it.
outdoor pasture increases the price of the milk by about 10 cents per litre. We could go on with many other animals and farming practices, but the
I'm not
summary
trying
is
to eat
clear.
some fucking
For the animals we eat the most, upgrading their
absolute
living conditions
dog
from
shit,
outright
like
torture to somewhat
biological
decent may
fucking
cost you
cell
about
slop.
50% more for beef and milk, 50% for eggs and pork, and 100% for chicken meat. The meat of the issue. Opinion part. Meat has gotten so cheap that we have to torture animals to keep the prices insanely low. This really is all there is to it. Food in development.
Chat, let me pause it. Chat. Did they actually play Among Us? Chat. I wanted to play the other day. Are they actually playing? Can they invite me? If you're not invited, blah blah. But they said they were playing it.
Countries is the cheapest it's been in history. In the US, the largest meat consumer in the world, an average person spends $337 a month on food, $88 on meat, eggs, and dairy. If these became an average 50% more expensive, that would increase the monthly expenditure on food by about $43. This may sound like a lot, but relative to income, this only means paying as much for food as US consumers did in 1987. In Germany...
Wait, what? Wait, relatively? I would have to... Relative to what, though?
$43.
Relative to percentage of how much money of income, or relative to actual raw amounts because of inflation or whatever?
This may sound like a lot, but relative to income, this only means paying as much for food as US consumers did in 1987. In Germany, the average person spends about 70 euros a month on meat, eggs, and dairy. If we increased prices by 50% on average to make the lives of these animals better in a really meaningful way, this would rise by about 35 euros to about 100 euros. If this still sounds too expensive, it may be because around 20% of all meat people buy is simply thrown away. Meat got so cheap that we often don't eat it before it goes bad. It's no longer valuable. Okay, so if you go shopping, what can you do? It can feel like you can't do anything as an individual consumer, but this is not true. The market follows demand. So if you don't want to buy torture meat, look at the labels on holding conditions. If there is none, it is torture meat for sure. If there is, well, it's complicated. It's often unclear what different labels mean, if they're strictly enforced or legally binding. Some are great, others whitewashing. And we haven't talked about the most expensive meat so far, organic meat.
What about a golden seal that says it has all the fucking all the stuff, all the dog shit stamps? We have just one stamp, the golden stamp. It's a golden stamp. Huh? Why don't they unify all these bullshitters into one bullshit? Say this is bullshit. Boom, done, and then you buy it.
You've probably noticed that many price estimates we've given here don't quite match your experience in the supermarket. This is in part because some retailers consider ethical products luxury goods and charge an even higher price, and also because many labels like organic, natural, ecological, bio, or the worst of all, biodynamic, often contain a lot of extras or pseudoscience that have nothing to do with animal welfare. Many, but not all of these labels include some of the best practices mentioned before, but not necessarily all. Organic brands often include, for a lack of a better word, stupid measures, like forbidding GMO feed. As we covered in another video, banning GMOs doesn't do anything good for you or the animals. It just makes your food more expensive and seem more natural, while you are consuming unnatural animal breeds, living a deeply unnatural life. Unfortunately, the label situation in many countries is extremely confusing.
My personal opinion on this, the take is you'll never make the population feel any way that they'll make things move. It is impossible to ever tell the population because the price speaks for itself so much that people are
often on purpose. All too often, we don't know
it's an
what
impossible
we're
battle.
really buying.
It's not an uphill battle.
If you can afford
the
it
hill is
and
like
want
this.
at least a high chance of torture-free meat, go for the label. If you can afford it, buy organic. If you can afford it and have time, research local farms and get your meat from a place you've seen yourself. There's one exception, too good not to mention: mussels. They suck up carbon and filter water, making coastlines cleaner. Calling mussels dumb is giving them too much credit. With no central nervous system and probably no thoughts or pain, they're basically moss. Really, everyone should eat more mussels. Okay, let's wrap up. You don't need to be vegan to think the current situation is unacceptable.
Interesting.
The conditions of most animals we eat are hard to stomach and could all be avoided if we paid as much for meat as our...
Why don't somebody make a big ass pool, like 5 kilometers pool long, put a bunch of mother suckers in there, right? A bunch of whatever that is, clams or some shit, and do a mega farm. You can sell that shit for like a bazillion.
Our parents did. Things are slowly getting
They do?
better. At least
I
in
need
the
to buy
West.
myself one of these.
Consumers can push the industry
I'll never
in
eat
the
it,
right
but
direction
it's sell it
if
though,
we
it'd be
bite
kinda
the
crazy.
bullet and pay more. If you can't afford this, maybe eat a bit less meat. Don't throw meat away. Maybe avoid the worst torture meat like pork, at least sometimes. And push for legislation that bans the most horrific practices. We can help make the lives of billions of animals dramatically better. It really is that simple.
Wait, sorry, he said, what was the solution? Wait.
Meat like pork, at least sometimes. And push for legislation that bans the most horrific practices.
Yeah.
We can help make the lives of billions of animals dramatically better. It really is that simple. You can only advocate for better policies if you have enough reliable information.
I don't think I'm gonna do
When
that.
financial incentives are prioritized, facts can be manipulated or even omitted altogether by side. This video was only possible thanks to a special group of people, our patrons. They're a vital part of the Kurzgesagt team, lifting us up, supporting us, and giving us the freedom to continue sparking curiosity.
Anyway. Wait, the Bill Gates thing, classic. Are they still sponsored by them or whatever?